guys? It's Mark Yoon, and today I'm bringing you another hopefully exciting video. So what I got for you today is a little bit of a discussion topic that I wanted to touch on. So it had me thinking, we've been going over Soul Calibur 6 a lot recently, since I started the daily videos. And one of the things I've been noticing is a lack of talk about the lore. I've seen some people bring it up here and there, but it hasn't been really fully touched upon in the comments section. It hasn't really open for discussion, just slight reasons why certain things would be in the game, or why certain things would be omitted from the game pretty much, or what goes where in the timeline. But what I wanted to have a discussion on is how they go about presenting the lore, because in this recent reboot, I think they did a semi-adequate job of doing so, but I feel like it's been implemented better in the past. So when we're talking about lore, the first thing we have to obviously touch upon is canon. So obviously now, since the series has been rebooted, the old games are no longer canon, I guess I would say. I guess you could go the dimension route and say that it's another timeline or another dimension, something like that. But it would still be that the current timeline that we're following now is the current events of where we are for up to date. So I wanted to talk about first people, how they expect lore to be presented, and people their expectations for how they absorb the lore, and how Bandai Namco and Project Soul actually give us those things. Now in the past, I think they've done a decent job. Obviously they didn't really get their footing until like Soul Calibur 2, so we're not necessarily going to disregard Soul Calibur 1 and Soul Edge / Soul Blade, but how they pretty much depicted those in the past was more like a weapons demo with text on the screen talking about like the story, which I think is fine, especially for earlier PlayStation 1 and Dreamcast games. That's definitely not something that we can, I guess, hold against them because of the limitations of the time, even though it was done pretty expansively in other means. Like, you can't really say that when there's games like Final Fantasy 7 and 8 on the same system. But how they did things from 2 going forward was obviously the way that they sought out to give us those things, and the main reason that they did that was, I guess, to build and expand upon their own franchise, that like people can get attached to characters and use certain characters not only for their movement means and their weapon styles, but also based on their personalities and the things that happen to them in the story. Because all of us have our favorite characters and everything, right? And there's usually reasons behind those things. We don't just like pick somebody because like we like how they look. It's basically like how we relate to them, or if we can identify with them or whatever. There's a multitude of reasons. For me personally, when I'm looking at a character, my mains have changed because of the way the characters have been written. So in the past, like, my main has always been like Taki and Mitsurugi. Now they're not the best well-written characters, and I'm not saying that I don't use them a lot today, but definitely I think my mains have changed. The way they can go about this is additional modes, first of all, because I feel like in Soul Calibur 3 we got a lot of extra lore tidbits. Even if it was non-canonical, they would give us tidbits towards the actual characters in like Chronicles of the Sword, or even Soul Calibur 2. That had a multitude of single-player modes that added to those things. We've talked about these in our Soul Calibur modes video. But the way that it's presented a lot is through text and through reading, especially in Soul Calibur 6, and I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, but it's definitely not an attention holder. When we are beating arcade mode or beating someone's story mode in the story section, it's kind of half and half, well done and not, because let me explain. So like in Guilty Gear, the first one, not for original systems, I mean for PlayStation 3, Zard, the story mode was there, but it was non-interactive. Like, you were just pretty much watching a elongated story cutscene, and there was no battles, nothing to keep you engaged. You were pretty much just like watching a video. You still got the story, you still got across what you're supposed to see, That's fine. Other games have done it that way as well. But I think Soul Calibur 6 did something along those lines where 90% of it you're just watching or reading, and the rest is like short, small battles here and there that feel like it's trying to pad out the runtime of that story. It'll be like you're going against like 4 generic characters, and like now you're moving on because something caught your eye. What I'm getting at is like I think it would be more in depth and more visually appealing if they actually gave us cinematics in the story modes as opposed to reading text. Now, reading text could be something that could be implemented well and finally done when you're talking about something like Libra of Souls mode or Chronicles of the Sword or something of that ilk. But I feel like when you're going towards doing the actual story mode, we need to kind of see what's going on. Like, in order for it to be burned into our brains, we need to visually adapt and visually like acknowledge what's happening on screen. That way it'll burn into our memories and we can go forward from there. Plus, a lot of characters, especially new ones such as Grow, we can see them on screen while we're fighting in the actual matches themselves, but we're not necessarily getting the finer details and points in their personalities. And if they're talking and their picture or portrait is on screen, I guess that kind of adds to the visualization of it. But I think it'll be a lot better if they actually animated it, or if it was rendered in the in-game graphics. Now, personally, I'm a big fan of like animation, so I would like to see them going forward in the future. If we're going to have a story mode, I'd like to see it like completely animated, which actually would probably save a lot more money than rendering things in cinematic 3D, and being able to take part in the story and letting us know why, the reasons why we have these characters and what they're doing. And the reason I thought about this is because like there's characters who are supposed to have like personalities that are vastly different from other characters, but they end up falling into holes of taking the short route when it comes to decision making and expanding on their characters. So I was playing Sophitia's story the other day again, and I was noticing that she started out like a really good, well-written character. She was spunky, like she just wanted to protect her sister, so she was going out trying to find Cassandra, and Cassandra at this point was trying to destroy Soul Edge, as we saw in the story, whatever. But what ends up happening is she basically, along the way, takes on the role of Sophitia and even uses her weapons, and therefore like in essence becomes Sophitia just because she wants Sophitia to settle down and live a happy life. I'm not going to go into spoilers if you haven't played the story. So she kind of has no character ambitions for herself. Like, you would say that like, yeah, her ambition is for her sister to be happy. I'm like, yeah, but what about the people that want her to be happy? So there's got to be like reasons for a character to do something, and usually that stems from either tragedy or wanting to surpass their own limitations, or you know, get over an obstacle in some way. There's classic footnotes in storytelling, but when I was playing as her story, it was just like nobody was opposed to her going out. She thought she would be opposed by Sophitia, but when she bumped into her, there was no problem at all. She was well liked by everyone, well respected by everyone. She had nothing to prove to herself or to anybody else. She just had one simple goal, which was to let her sister lead a happy life, and that was what she set out to do. She overcame obstacles that I couldn't expect her legitimately to overcome, because even in the story mode it tells herself, I've never used a sword. And then she falls back on a trope of she was being helped by the gods, by the Greek gods. So that wasn't ever expanded upon. We see like a shadowy figure talking to them. We have no idea who the shadowy figure is. For all we know, it could have been Aswell trying to push the story forward, but it's never expounded upon. So from the beginning of the story to the end of the story, I realized that I learned nothing. I didn't learn anything about her character. I didn't learn anything about her motivations. Everything at the end went back to being everything towards the beginning. The only snippet we got is after you beat the story, there's like an alpha, a beta, and like there's I guess a sub part that comes before the story that actually technically comes after the story, or in between, and what we see there is a little tidbit of personality, I guess I want to say. But if you're especially going to have a character like Cassandra, and I'm not saying she's a clone, her weapon fighting style is totally different from Sophitia's, but if we're going to have a similar character like that, they have to differentiate themselves enough that the person actually cares about them. And I know that some people do. I know some people on my channel are huge Cassandra fans, even over Sophitia. That's fine, I can understand why, but I feel like the character needs to express herself more as a motivation just for herself, or the common good, or the greater good, or something along those lines. Something that even has to do with Soul Edge. Like, her story had nothing to do with any of that. And I get we can have side stories that are tied to the characters, don't directly impact, like, the end result of the story, because that's already pre-scripted. But we can still have them give tidbits of lore here and there that actually help towards that. Basically, all we learned from her story is her brother likes bread. Cassandra, like, deserves to be at home or something like that, and she wants her to be happy and, like, stay there. And that's pretty much it. Like, there's, like, a cult thing involved, but that's only for, like, one small portion of the game. She learns how to purify souls, like, out of nowhere. Just saying, I think this is how it's supposed to be done, and she just, like, bam, does it, and it's, like, done for the rest of the game. I don't know where that was at with poor Hilda's story and her dad. Like, maybe we could have tied that together, like, have her run into the king and have her, like, purify him. That's why he's able to regain his consciousness at the end of Hilda's story and talk to her for a bit. So, I don't know, there's, like, little tidbits they could have done storytelling-wise here and there that could have made me like the character more, because when she was first announced, I was like, I don't care, whatever. But then, like, I played as her, and I'm like, yeah, her fighting mode's kind of cool, I can use her for different characters, but do I really care in the end? And the answer that I had was no, question mark. Like, I guess, like, I'd want to see more, but using her is not, like, the rule. This was just an example. The rest of the cast has kind of done that way in a similar fashion too. I feel like if you're just sitting there engaged with text and you're reading and watching, like, a character's perspective, and then the bad guys, that's another thing too. The villains in this don't really have good motivations for things. They're not really well written villains. Like, Aswell is pretty much kind of the typical, like, I'm an evil warlord and warlock, and this is why I'm here, is because I'm evil. Where, yeah, you can get to a certain point where, like, your motivations, like, change you, or, like, you're turned or whatever, but, like, we never get any tidbits that was ever the case. It's just like, he's a bad guy. And I feel like we got a lot more of that in past games. I mean, a lot different from that in past games, like Algol, for example, like his son, and, like, you're like, wow, he started this as a noble cause, and he ended up living long enough to become the monster he feared and that he fought. And I think that was poetic, and you almost don't want him to lose because you're half on his side, even though he's going about things the wrong way. Same goes for Cervantes, same goes for, I mean, some of the characters obviously you don't really care about, but Zoslamel is another good example. Like, he was just literally trying to do the right thing in his opinion. But that's why I feel like when we take the baby out, we throw the baby out with the bathwater, and we just, like, literally lump Soul Calibur, like, 1 through 3/4 together into one game and call it a reboot, but we don't expand upon the story, but we are still calling it a reboot. Expecting us to ignore everything that came before, because that's what a reboot is. It's just literally, like, the series is taking some old themes and stuff from the past, and they're starting from a new starting point and going forward. Pretty much a reboot is, like, how we would have made the game back in that time had we, like, had this technology or done it this way, whatever. And, like, we can talk about funding or whatever another time, but storytelling is free, and it's easy to implement. Even if you're not using resources to animate something or to render cutscenes in full 3D, you can use the in-game engine to tell your story in a way that is still appealing, because the graphics are still decent. So it's not like we're, like, going to be completely bored out of our skulls when we're trying to watch the cutscenes that are like in game. I mean, we're engaged with the super attacks and stuff, right? All that stuff will be implemented into a story, even how short they want to make it per which one. I just feel like, as probably my favorite fighting game franchise, that I feel like there's a lot of negativity surrounding this game, more so I feel like than they had with 5, because I was around for both, and I feel like this game gets piled on more, and I try to always bring up the positivity with it, but it's kind of hard when you have these hardline rules to fall back on that we really need to think about. But I think it's important, because if we want this series to get better, if we want this franchise to learn from its mistakes and not just try and reboot, cut their losses, and move forward, then we need to voice our opinions. And I'm not saying that Namco Bandai is going to directly see this video or know what I'm saying, but hopefully that I spark something in somebody else, or a conversation occurs and starts to happen where more people start talking about it on different platforms, and we move it to Twitter, and then Twitter's, by the way, where everybody sees everything, so that's the best place to be if you want to talk directly to Bandai Namco or Project Soul or Motohiro Okubo or any of that stuff. But I feel like even if we plant a seed where they put that in the back of their head, where the next time they're developing a game, they're like, well, why don't we just do the story mode the same as 6? And then maybe one person out of the team is like, well, how about we render it with the in-game graphics, because that won't take long, and we won't have to, like, you know, hire an artist just to draw all these different facial expressions for portraits, which probably take just as long, to be honest, as an artist myself. So I don't know, like, directly what impact expanding the lore can have on the series, but I feel like if we draw a deeper connection between ourselves and the characters that we're trying to play as, then we're going to want to know their desires and their wants, and like we're gonna feel fulfilled when they actually achieve them, or we're gonna feel upset or sad when they fail. We're gonna know what hurts them, and we're going to identify with those things, and that's just good storytelling. So I think that if they take that into consideration, the game could be vastly greater. Not this one particularly, because they can't really change what they've already done, but if they do make it the next iteration, if there is a Soul Calibur 7, I want to see a solid story where they tie everything together. I don't just want to see them erasing 5 and throwing together 1 through 4 and calling it a day. Like, I want to see them actually like going into each individual game. Now, I was kind of excited when I found out that this was a reboot and they were only going to reboot like 1 and 2, because like there wasn't much lore there to begin with, so they had the option to expand upon it. But I mean, we've got a bit of 3 in there. We've got some 4 thrown in for good measure. There's like even talks about like Sophia's kids. Like it's like kind of a hodgepodge of everything together, and it feels more like this is the last game in the series kind of game, as opposed to this is the beginning of a new chapter. And I really hope that's not the case, but I don't want this to be the bookend that Soul Calibur leaves behind, because it has a great legacy, and I want us to expand the stage of history, and I want us to all come together and like share our love for this awesome game, who has some of the most fluid fighting mechanics that I've ever played as, and was never as stiff as an MK, or was never as limiting as like a virtual fighter, and never destroyed your thumbs like Street Fighter. It's just something that I want to see happy, and I'm trying my best to still play the game. I still play the game a lot. I still get longevity out of the game. I'm not saying it was a waste of money. I'm not saying it was a bad game. I'm just saying that when these things are taken into consideration by the teams, they're going to have an exponentially better product at the end of the day. Look at Mortal Kombat's story and see how that changed since we rebooted the series in Mortal Kombat 9. Look at even in the 3D era games where you're running around doing stuff as Shujinko or Taiga or Taven. That really brought us into the world and brought us alongside the characters, even the spin-off games and stuff. So I feel like if they go that route and they actually visually inject us into the story and into the world, which is more important, that's why I think we'll connect better. So let's hope we get like another Chronicles of the Sword kind of mode that's actually better. Let's hope we get some kind of beat 'em up style thing, and we know we've done it because they have side project games that they've done it with. Or so, at least just some visual aspect to the story beyond reading and the occasional cutscene, like to bookend it. But I want to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. How do you think they can expand upon the story? I just want to know how you think they can do it and have us go along with it and like it better than we did with 6. Are you fine with just reading text? Does not really matter to you? All these things I want to know. Like, let's get a conversation started and we can talk about it. Maybe come back to this at another time. But for right now, we're going to drop the video there. And as always, guys,